Hello all and welcome to Astro Wheel of Fortune. My name is Vlada and I read tarot, and today I'm doing a reading on the Empress. This is the next major arcana card in our series where I ask my tarot deck to elaborate on the energy of the major arcana cards and give us some information that maybe we are missing as a collective when it comes to these cards, or just something that they want to highlight for us. So I've done all the other major arcanas that come before the Empress so far. So I've done the Fool, the Magician, the High Priestess, and the Empress, of course, is the next one that we're going to be looking at. So I'm also referring to this book, as many of you know, as I mentioned before. It's the Tarot History, Symbolism, and Divination by Robert M. Place. There's not much to refer to, I will say, for the Empress and the Emperor. They're very straightforward in the book. Kind of like the traditional representation of like masculine energy, feminine energy. There's not that much that I probably will refer to. I was at the beach yesterday and I brought this book with me, and the tide came in and the book was in my bag and it got a little bit destroyed. I'm really sad. I'm still waiting for the pages to like dry properly. I've been kind of like trying to get them dry. So I don't even want to handle that book too much right now because it's just like damp from the seawater. But anyway, so we've got the Empress card here. We're going to ask her what she wants to talk about. How does she want us to understand her energy? And yeah, we'll get into it. So if you want to watch the other ones, because I've noticed I kind of refer back to the other cards as I progress through the major arcana. If you want to watch the other ones, I have a playlist on my channel called Tarot by Tarot. And that is where you will see all the other readings and all that the other cards wanted to say about themselves. But we're going to get into the Empress. So the Empress, what do you have to tell us about your energy? What do you have to tell us about? Is there something we're missing, or what do you want to speak on? Well, this one came out. Wow, Six of Wands. Worship me. Revere me. The Empress energy in this current time as well, please keep in mind that these readings that I'm doing, they are specifically for, whoever comes across these readings. I'm a big believer that whoever comes across these readings, they will be useful. But I also do feel like these energies can very much change. This might be something that's relevant for the next couple of years. And what if we were to do the exact same reading again in a couple of years? The answers could be very different. But what I'm seeing with the Empress energy is that anytime the Empress energy comes out in a reading, there's something like, for some reason, I'm hearing worship and revere. The Empress energy will come out in a reading when it wants to highlight something that you should really worship, or kind of like, I do feel the word worship is important because there's something that the Empress seems to want to highlight about worshiping certain aspects even of yourself. So, for example, an Empress might come out when you're asking in a reading about, let's say, about career. And the Empress, the way that I'm reading this energy is like she wants to come out a lot of the time to highlight that it's time to really worship a certain aspect of yourself. And this doesn't mean from a point of ego. It doesn't mean that it's like I'm worshiping myself because I'm egotistical and, I'm worshiping myself from this like narcissistic point of view. The Empress just recognizes that sometimes parts of us need to be worshipped in order to continue to function. And that's when she likes to come out. She likes to show up as that energy. So she's saying it's not just about being in this comforting energy. And again, that is something that Robert M. Place does talk about in the in the book, it talks about how she is, she sits in sensuality on plush cushions in a field of grain next to a waterfall, symbols of abundance and sexuality. And there's this sense of her being surrounded by comfort, anything that she might need. There's nourishment around her. But the way that I'm seeing, so she is connecting nourishment and worship within this energy. So she's saying the Empress energy is not just about nourishment and nurturing. In reality, sometimes in order to nourish ourselves or in order to nurture ourselves effectively, there needs to be a level of worship of something. So for example, if there's a certain skill that has brought you to a good place in your career, that has brought you to some sort of progress in your career, that you have a certain duty to that skill to worship it, to give it, and not worship it blindly forever, but maybe in that moment to worship that skill, to say, thank you so much. I'm kind of getting like, let's say you were an illustrator and you really had to develop your illustrating skill, your drawing skill. You had to sit and sketch for hours. You had to do so much practice in terms of sketching and drawing in order to become this like really, really strong and capable illustrator. The Empress would show up in a reading for you to tell you, if you were asking about your career, to let you know, hey, this skill that you have cultivated, again, I'm going to be going back to the other cards that I was talking about. So if you want to watch the other cards, she's bringing up the Magician. So the Magician energy, again, as we were talking, the Magician energy was very much about grasping onto your curiosity, whatever you find naturally curious, whatever you are curious about naturally, and seeing that as your seed for manifestation. Because what the Magician card was saying to us was, if you're not curious about something, you're not going to be teaching yourself authentically on it. If you're not teaching yourself authentically on it, then you're not going to find authentic teachers and mentors that resonate with you. If you don't find authentic teachers and mentors that resonate with you, you can lose yourself in false mentors and false teachers. And the natural seed of curiosity that grasps onto the manifestation, that's how you hook onto the manifestation, start manifesting in an authentic way to you. When you become authentically curious in something, you progress that in that kind of way. So let's say if you were an illustrator, the way that you became an illustrator is probably that you got hooked onto drawing. You became authentically curious about drawing, and you became so curious in it that you manifested this career for yourself because you kept getting more and more curious. And the Empress card is saying, I come in at the end when you maybe have manifested the full extent of the skill. Maybe you didn't manifest the exact result of what that skill can bring you yet. Maybe you didn't manifest all the riches in the world that she's associated with Venus, and I often look at Venus as talent. There is a big energy that she wants to talk about talent as well. Sorry, I'm channeling a lot, so this is a bit choppy, but this will come together in a second. I know it. What she's saying is that she comes in when you've manifested a talent, or you've put your curiosity to work enough to cultivate a certain talent or a skill that now needs to be appreciated and worshipped. Maybe you don't have a piece of art that you want to appreciate or worship yet. Maybe you don't have an end product that you want to appreciate or worship yet. Oh, I'm already seeing how the Empress and the Emperor Empress is talent. Emperor is taking that talent and bringing it to the end product. But one can't exist without the other. So that'll be interesting when we do the Emperor reading. But I'm already seeing the correlation. The Empress is one point of manifestation. You first have to manifest the talent before you can manifest the thing. That's what she's trying to say. But if you manifest the talent and you don't worship or appreciate or honor or revere the talent within yourself, you will never manifest the thing, the outcome, the result. You won't get to manifest it because the talent feels underappreciated. And the beautiful thing about the talent, that's why she also represents the feminine, the more yin energy, if you want to call it that, is because those kind of energies of like being receptive, being fluid, there's not a lot of proof. And yet there's so much proof, she's saying. So the thing about the Empress, she could really come out in a reading when you are not appreciating the talent or the work that it took to become talented at something. And she's giving me this energy of like, there's like a limbo space. There's a moment in time between mastering a talent and starting to and creating something that, like, using that talent to create something that's also worth of honor. So if you look at the Empress as worshiping the talent, and the Emperor is like worshiping the end product. So the Empress is like, if you don't worship the talent, if you don't give your thanks and honor to the talent for creating the end product is false, and you've manifested something very false. She is actually very connected to manifestation. She's the creation part of manifestation. So something the Empress card also wants to know, we forget that she is also, she's a crucial element of manifestation, which is creation. Because without creation, there's no manifestation, she's saying. And that is not worshipped enough in our society right now. We don't worship people's talent without the product. It's like only when that person's song becomes popular or goes into the charts that we go, wow, that person is talented. It's only when that person's art becomes popularized that we go, wow, that person is talented. It's only when a person becomes a big movie star that we go, that person is talented. We don't, and I guess that is like, not to make this like political, but there's something about like patriarchal energy being, it's like the end product is what is being worshipped. And while it should be worshipped, she's saying it should be worshipped, but right now there's an imbalance that I'm picking up, that the talent itself, that to cultivate the product, of course, yes, it took a long time and it took a lot of work to cultivate that product alone. Yes, fair enough, she's saying. But this is only half of the story. You also take a long time to cultivate the talent, and then you cultivate the product. And if you don't worship, don't revere, don't respect, don't honor the talent, you won't honoring the product becomes very phony, is what I'm hearing. Because you're just honoring one part of the process. And I feel like there's an energy of like, we forget that there's like a bit of a calling out energy from the Empress. There's a forgetfulness to honor the talent. So there is this feeling, and I'm being shown like, if you want to cultivate your talent further, you must first sit down and appreciate how far you've come in your talent. No matter how much better someone else is at drawing or painting or singing or dancing, you need to look at where you began with your own talent or skill. You know, it's talent and skill. It's the talent and skill that it takes to create. That's what the Empress is. It's not just about the creative flow, although she is about that as well. It's not just about the fertile energy of creativity. It's not just about bringing something to fruition. Because she is about creation. So she is about creating something. But the thing about your talent is like, you can create so much with a talent. But in terms of it being recognized or seen or being popularized in like popular culture, or it becoming famous, because there is this energy of like, just because you created something that is not in the public eye or is not recognized by the grander public does not mean that something that you created wasn't talented. There's this feeling of, you could create something in the privacy of your own home. You could create a painting and never show it to anyone. And it could be the most talented thing that a person has done in that point in time. But because you didn't show it to other people, you will believe that it's not. And so there's something about believing that you are talented, believing that you are skillful, that is really important about the Empress and when she comes up in a reading. It's not just about you have the potential to create, you have the potential, you have like this fertile energy to offer up to the world. It's also about that understanding. I've cultivated enough talent and enough skill in myself to create something amazing. And even if someone, like, even if nobody sees this thing that I've created, even if a limited amount of people recognize it, I've still created something absolutely incredible and something very talented. So there, she is very much, she's talking about talent, and it's funny because like Venus energy, it does talk about talent to me. Like me specifically, I do associate Venus with talent. It's like there's an accumulation energy that I'm getting with the Empress. It's all about accumulating talent and skill. You don't, oh, there's another thing that comes through. The Empress likes to highlight to us that talent and skill is not something that we're just born with, and she's challenging the energy of being gifted. It's something that we accumulate, whether it be in our own lifetime or through our, what I'm hearing is like, or through our lineage or DNA. You can be born talented, but it's not because it was just plopped onto you. It's because your lineage accumulated it enough. Your lineage accumulated your talent, this talent that you have received, somehow through your DNA, through your lineage, it was accumulated enough for you to receive it upon birth, but it does not mean that it wasn't accumulated. It does not mean that it wasn't gathered through effort. And so the Empress card is talking to me here about, yes, I'm comfortable. Yes, I'm sitting in comfort and I'm on these cushions and I'm sitting on these pillows and I'm sitting, you know, in a field of grain by the waterfall. But I made those cushions. I, planted or put seeds out for the grain to come up. I've situated myself by the waterfall so that I could be comfortable. I made it so that I would be comfortable. And so there's something about talents and skills. She really wants to be talking about talents and skills. There's something about talents and skills. You know, we look at people who are maybe like prodigies, or they were born with a talent, or it's like, oh, this person, they just like came out of the womb, like being able to sing or to dance or to draw. And what the Empress is saying, yes, but it does not mean that effort wasn't put into that talent through generations, through lineages, through ancestry lines. The effort was still there. And she's also talking about skills and talents. They're meant to be effort that is pleasurable. And that's what the Empress also wants us to remember. Skills and talents is effort that is pleasurable. And so if you're acquiring a skill or a talent and you don't feel a pleasurable energy in acquiring that skill and that skill and that talent is probably not for you to acquire. But she's also talking, she's kind of saying like that would be the Emperor side of things. Like she's kind of referring to the Emperor a lot as I'm doing this reading, but she's kind of talking about how her energy is about skills and talents that you acquire that are pleasurable. It's a pleasure to develop these skills and talents. It's a pleasure to gather. You know, it's like, I made these cushions and I love sitting on them, but I also loved making them. I also loved making the threads and putting the threads through the cushions as I was making them. I enjoyed putting the seeds out for the grain to grow. Like, that's the energy that I'm getting here. It's like, it's when you gather skill, talent, or knowledge. Not so much knowledge. She's showing me a lot more of the physical. When we do something that's more physical, that, you know, whether it be practicing singing or practicing drawing, practicing painting, practicing dancing, making things. That's her energy, but she talks about deriving pleasure through acquiring a skill. That's what her energy is. When the Empress, obviously there's multifaceted, every single major arcana card especially, but even minor arcana cards will have such a multifaceted amount of meanings. This is just what she wants to focus on right now in this reading, is what I'm getting. So I'm going with it. But the Empress is really wanting us to remember that we deserve to acquire skills that are pleasurable and enjoyable to absorb. And it's like we become more talented in our pleasure, through our pleasure. That's what true talent is. It's when you are able to acquire a talent, acquire a skill, and derive pleasure through doing so. And it's not just about creating with that talent. We also need to go backwards and honor the time that it took us to acquire that talent through pleasure or skill. And then she's kind of bringing it more to sensuality, and she's talking about how we evolve in our life through sensual experiences. So she's kind of also pointing to the fact that we don't recognize that, you know, enjoying nice food or having pleasurable experiences, that's also an acquiring of some sort of skill or talent. It's just that our human brain doesn't perceive it as talent or doesn't perceive it as a skill. But there's a skill, there's a talent in knowing how to find pleasure in life, in knowing, like, she's kind of showing me like a person who knows, you know, I'm going to go out today and I'm going to like find a restaurant, or like I'm going to find a food that I'm really going to enjoy, and I'm going to go and I'm going to, you know, I'm going to go hang out by the beach or something, and I'm going to derive pleasure from the sunshine, and maybe I'm going to go swimming and I'm going to derive pleasure from that. And, you know, a person trying a few things, and maybe a person goes to the beach, but they don't really like the sunshine, and maybe the sunshine is not really for them, but they know that they've enjoyed. There's a talent in figuring out what is pleasure to you, and not like pleasure in this kind of way where pleasure becomes addictive, but where you're able to maintain this balance of pleasure, that you don't become addicted to one kind of stimulant or one type of pleasure. There's a talent in that, in being able to weave your pleasure in such a way that is so authentic to you that you never have to over rely on one type of pleasure. Wow. That is very interesting. And she wants us to remember that in readings, when she pops up, remembering that she could be coming up as a reminder of balancing our pleasure. Maybe she sometimes comes out as a reminder of like, hey, you haven't balanced you haven't explored new types of pleasures in a while. You haven't kind of experimented and tried to figure out what pleasures make you, like, kind of having different tiny little bits of pleasure weave into this big energy of pleasure within yourself. And she's saying that's a talent. That's a skill to do that, to know how to enjoy life with pleasure and never have it become an addiction, never have it become an obsession. I'm almost getting kind of like the Empress is the other side of the Devil card for some reason. It's so interesting. Like, the Empress is the energy that knows that if you have too much of a pleasurable thing for too long in like in a very obsessive kind of manner, it's gonna have an opposite effect. And she's very healthy in that. She's very healthy in that understanding, whereas the Devil energy is the opposite. You know, the Devil energy is like, this is a pleasurable thing. This is the thing that's gonna always give me pleasure and is always gonna make me enjoy my life. And the Empress is wise enough to know that that's not the situation. That's not what the truth is. She knows that in order to experience true pleasure, you have to know, like, you almost have to have your own algorithm for pleasure. And in order to have that algorithm of pleasure for yourself and to know how to keep that pleasure perfectly balanced and flowing in a very perfect way, you have to experiment. You have to deviate outside of the norm in terms of your pleasure from time to time. Not all the time, but in a way that feels authentic. So there is a lot of interesting energy that I'm picking up from the Empress here today. So let's see what else we've got. The Empress is, you know what? Wasn't it the High Priestess that had the Page of Pentacles in the exact same position? With the Page of Pentacles here, I'm picking up on like You have to study your own pleasure. You have to learn, because Page of Pentacles is pieces of information and it's kind of student mentality. And she's coming up as this energy of like, you have to study your own pleasure. You have to study your own enjoyment of things. Because if you don't study and understand your own enjoyment, and you have to give yourself credit. The Empress is really big on giving yourself credit and giving credit where credit is due. That is a really big energy that I'm picking up on with the Empress. So sometimes the Empress will actually come out in a reading when she wants you to give credit where credit is due. So I'm definitely keeping track of that. I'm definitely going to keep that in mind. Or maybe she is saying that, you know, maybe this could be like a praise toward. I honestly feel like the Empress comes out in a reading when we need praise. And we're not giving ourselves the due praise for how we've cultivated certain talents, how we've cultivated our ability to exist in a sensual way that we're able to derive pleasure. And that's why the Empress is not only about indulgence. The Empress is also about healthy choices. So she knows that in order to indulge in a pleasurable way, you need to know how to balance that out with healthy choices. And it's all a learning experience, but there's a lot of energy of acquiring talent, skill, acquiring pleasure, but in a way that is interesting, intricate, and is enjoyable to a person. But the way she's kind of talking, if the Magician is the point of curiosity in terms of manifestation, and if the High Priestess is the point where we are faced with challenging of our own biases, and we need to look at, you know, if you want to watch my High Priestess video, that one was very interesting as well. If the High Priestess is where we are faced with, it's time for you to see things from like the opposition's perspective and see, is it truly something you want to manifest, or is it something you want to manifest because of your own biases? The Empress is the next step where you've decided that you definitely want to manifest this thing. And the Empress is where you are saying to yourself, I am going to cultivate the skill, the talent, and I'm going to and the enjoyment that is needed in order to manifest this. So the Empress is kind of saying, you know, we can manifest things, but manifesting something without enjoying the process of manifesting it, what is the point? Moving forward with a manifestation that you don't enjoy manifesting as the process keeps going, as the process moves forward, then what is the point? What is the point? That lets you know that manifestation is not going to serve you. If we look at the energy that was coming up in the Magician card, where we were talking about the metaphor of using a sand to make a sandcastle. Just because you made a sandcastle out of the sand doesn't mean it's the molecules of the sand are all still the same. Even though the sand has taken on the shape of a sandcastle, the same molecules, as in the same energy, is affecting the sandcastle as the sand that was laying still. And so the Empress reminds us that if you're manifesting something, you need to enjoy manifesting. You need to enjoy the manifestation of something before it becomes the end product. You can't expect to enjoy the end product when you didn't enjoy the creation of that product. So it's like if you're trying to manifest a job and you're not enjoying your journey. So in a way, the Empress wants to talk about the journey. If you're creating, it's kind of like, again, I'm going to go back to the idea of the meal, because the book that I'm referring to, in early depictions of the Magician, I'm going to cross-reference these cards a lot, I feel, the more we go into the major arcana. But the Magician was represented as a cook in some of the tarot. I think that's right. Or the Magician was represented not necessarily as a cook, but he had a cake, a glass, some small baked goods, and a culinary knife. So there's like an association with food in and, you know, baked goods and stuff like that in some early depictions of the Magician. And I was thinking like culinary chef. So let's say if a chef was making a meal, we were talking about like having all the elements, because the Magician has the pentacles, the swords, the wands, and the cups, and also it's about anyway, I'm not going to go into the Magician, but the Empress is kind of similar energy of like, if you're not enjoying the process of cooking, why are you even cooking? That's what the Empress is really kind of saying here. The Empress is more of a, why would I do something if I don't enjoy it? And so she can come out in a reading where she is either questioning, like, are you enjoying it? Are you enjoying what you're doing? And what's the point of you even doing this if you're not enjoying it? Or she comes out to let you know that this is meant to be an enjoyable experience. Enjoy yourself. Really derive pleasure from this experience. Of course, it will depend on the context of the reading. But that's the feeling that I'm getting. But the really big energy that I'm picking up on is the Empress wants us to remember that we need to worship our own skills, or like, I don't know if worship is the right word, but that's the word that comes to my mind. It's kind of like giving thanks to your skills, giving that really honorable appreciation to the skills and the talents that brought you. Even before they bring you to the end product, you need to acknowledge your skills and talents that are here in existence, because she's saying just because you don't have a physical object, to say, I'm famous or I'm recognized or I'm successful or whatever, that does not mean that your talents are not completely valid and fascinating and beautiful. And your talents and skills carry a certain level of energy, or like, I don't know if you want to call it vibration, on their own, without any object to stand there and represent them. You don't need an object. You don't need a proof to represent your talents. Your talents are valid on their own. If you're a talented person, you're a talented person. And only you will be able to actually know that. Because the thing is, the Empress is saying, you'll know if you're talented or not. If you're not talented, you will feel that deep down in your core, because you will know that you didn't cultivate a talent enough. You didn't push a talent far enough. But a part of you will also know deep down in your core that you are talented when you've worked and put your, everything into a talent. If you're practicing the violin every day, but maybe you're not a famous violinist, you will still know that you're talented. You may just have not received that kind of accolades. But there is a thing about the Empress as well that wants us to know about her energy, is that if you don't give yourself that kind of honor, and if you don't give yourself that kind of praise for your own talents, it's very unlikely that somebody else will. There needs to be a level of praise from yourself towards your, and nurturing, I suppose, with the Empress card. Certain level of praise and nurturing towards yourself in terms of talent and your ability to accumulate skills and this kind of effort before someone else can give that to you. But I just keep getting this energy of accumulation. And so another thing that I'm getting with the Empress, she wants to talk about attraction now, but not in terms of like physical attraction or intimate attraction to other people, attraction to yourself. And there's something with the Empress that she's like, just the way you accumulate talent, just the way you accumulate skill, just the way you accumulate pleasure, because she keeps saying you accumulate pleasure. You don't experience pleasure, you accumulate it. Interesting. And you gather, because there's accumulation and gathering is something that's coming through. I suppose that's why the Empress can be so strongly connected to Taurus. I mean, it's Venus in general, but like Taurus especially is very much, to me, is about gathering things, accumulating things. But it's not just about, because the funny thing about the Empress, she's not about accumulating objects. She's not about accumulating wealth. She's not as in like material, physical wealth. She is about accumulating experiences, creativity, and talent. That is her main. She is abundant without any money. She is abundant without any. It's like she creates her own abundance. She creates her own abundance. And so the feeling that I'm getting of attraction and accumulating this attraction to yourself, the more you accumulate talents, the more you prove to yourself, I'm so attractive. But it's kind of like when you cultivate a talent, you accumulate, she keeps wanting to say accumulate a talent within yourself. So maybe if we reframe the way we visualize, because we say cultivate a talent or build a talent up, right? Maybe, but she wants us to almost look at it as like we're accumulating a talent, and it's like we're bringing our energy inward. There's something about the Empress that reminds us to bring our energy inward, but not in this way of like you need to hide yourself or become introverted. It's about like, how can you accumulate things into yourself and feed things to yourself, feed experiences to you, feed talent into you? Because she's like, energetically accumulating a talent, a skill, pleasure, in order to output something really beautiful. But the outputting part is not the most important part. The accumulation part is what's important. Because how does soil become fertile? The soil isn't just fertile. You need to like put fertilizer in it. It needs to be watered. There needs to be agents of fertility that go into the soil before the soil becomes fertile. At least that's the way that and it's similarly, she's also giving me the energy of like a woman who is fertile. She accumulates energy into herself. She absorbs like a sponge abundant energy. And when there's enough abundant energy within her, that when she is not spent in her energy, she's able to be fertile. I mean, obviously that's just a metaphor, but she's obviously, the energy that I'm getting is just like, in order to be fertile, because we look at fertility in the wrong way as humanity, as the collective. We look at fertility as something that gives us like the ground. Earth gives us resources, Earth gives us resources. Woman gives us children. Uterus gives us children. But it's like we need to look at fertility as like, first it's an accumulation process. There's no fertility without accumulation process of nutrients, of healthy things going into the person's body or going into the Earth's body, I suppose, Earth's soil. The accumulation has to happen before the output. Fertility is a process. It's not just one thing of giving birth to something. There's giving birth, but there's also like the accumulation part that we don't recognize. And so the Empress is kind of saying that when we see her come up in a reading, and this, I've been at fault with this as well myself when I read, we jump to that conclusion that, creativity, you're going to create a lot. It's all about being very creative and abundant and being able to birth a lot of things into the world. But the Empress is like, nuh-uh. Nuh-uh. Not always. Yes, maybe that can be an interpretation in some shape or form. But first and foremost, the accumulation is important. Before I birth anything into this world, am I satisfied? Am I fertilized? It's like, am I fertilized in order to be fertile? That's the question that the Empress wants us to ask. And that can be pertaining to talent and skill as well. Am I fertilized in my talent enough in order to become fertile in my energy to create a project, to create something that is going to be of value? Or is it going to be barren? Am I trying to create a project from nothing? Am I trying to create a project from a very starved energy? And the Empress is like, how do you nourish your energy? Through pleasure, through acquiring talents and skills that are pleasurable to acquire, through having comfortable experiences, rest, and nourishment. The Empress is not the one that nourishes. She can be, but she can only nourish if she feels nourished enough herself. And she will never jump to nourish anybody if she knows that she is not nourished enough in herself. And so she wants us to remember as well, before you try to nourish somebody else, Make sure that you've got enough nourishment to pass around. Five of Pentacles. I feel like that just confirms. It's that starved energy. The Empress card can come out, especially I'm kind of getting, if anyone reads reversals, you don't have to. You will see that if you watched my tarot reading that I did on tarot in general, the tarot cards kind of came through saying like you don't have to read reversals, but there's no wrong or right way. But especially if she comes out in the reverse, it's like your reminder to fertilize yourself in some sort of way, to nourish yourself in some sort of way before you go and make a project, before you go and start a project, or you go and do something. The Empress card wants us to remember that if someone is looking for nourishment from you and they know that you have no nourishment to give them, it's okay to set some boundaries and to say, I'm not giving you any nourishment. Because the thing is, I'm also noticing with the Five of Pentacles, we've got a woman and a child walking in the cold. Because if you try to nourish someone from a place of nourishment, what you're going to end, or malnourishment, if you try to nourish someone from a place of malnourishment, you're just going to malnourish both of you. And both of you are going to be left with nothing. Not only are you not going to be able to nourish them, but it's going to have an opposite effect. And she's kind of relating that back to the whole thing of talent and skill. If these skills and talents have been nourishing you, learning how to dance, learning how to draw, learning how to sing, and you go straight to, okay, I'm going to make something really great now. I'm going to make a beautiful creation now, and it's going to be, I need it to be successful, or I want to be revered for this. If you don't nourish these skills and efforts and talents back, you're kind of starving yourself in some sort of way. So there's this feeling of, when you cultivate a talent, when you notice yourself getting better, when you notice, like that dance move I did is actually, I wasn't able to do that a couple of months back. Or like the way I'm drawing, like I really need to appreciate how far I've come in my drawing. I really need to really sit with that. And through the whole of this reading, I've been seeing an altar, and I haven't like mentioned it, but I feel like it's time to mention it now. I've been seeing an altar the whole way through this reading. And I feel like having an altar to your talents, to your skills can really help even. But even if it's not an altar, just being able to sit with those talents and skills and give them that respect and give them that thanks for nourishing you. And again, the Empress card is kind of bringing up the whole idea of like earth and how, when we look at fertility, we look at earth gives me resources. Earth gives us resources as a collective, but we don't honor the earth, and we don't say, wow, a lot of work went into this to give us these resources. Similarly, like if a woman gives birth, and it's like as above, so below, everything is mirroring, and this is where this energy is coming through. It's like if a woman took 9 months to cultivate a child within her, to manage that kind of energy, to create a child with her own nourishment of her body, of her energy, and then births that child, and the people around her don't say, wow, we have a lot of respect for you for giving us this child, whoever gets to have this child in their family now or whatever. If the person she's having a child with does not give her that respect, that nourishment back that she so needs, then there's a cycle of starvation that begins to happen. And so something that I'm also getting with the Empress, she has a lot to say, which is, I think is right, because I feel like there's a lot to kind of explore here. But what she's saying as well is like, if you are going to create something, create for, especially if it's for an audience. I think this is an interesting point. Create for an audience that will appreciate first. And there's a really big emphasis on like creating for, like, if you're going to create something, whoever you're creating for, make sure that they're going to honor what you've created for them. Because if they're not going to honor what you've created for them, that is just a cycle of starvation waiting to happen, where you continue creating, hoping that people will honor it, hoping that people will feel, will give you nourishment back. Because when you create something, even if it's a creative project, and you give it to an audience that does not give you nourishment for the creation that you have created, it creates a certain level of starvation within you. And so what I'm getting is, maybe some of us try to go like really far very quickly, and we try to create something and we say, I'm going to put it out there and I'm going to put it out for the world to see. And yes, we should be visible. She does talk about visibility here, but she's saying show it to people who you know will really care and protect this creation. Start out with creations that are smaller. Sorry, I'm getting a bit of a tickle in my throat. Creations that are for smaller audiences, or audience that you know has your back, or has this, because it's a cycle of nourishing. I nourish you, you need to nourish me back. I nourish you, you need to nourish me back. And so she is kind of talking about like artists and creatives, creators. There is something about you can continue creating for audiences that are not giving you, but it's not just about like, let's say you're creating something, you're putting out on your social media, and you have a certain amount of followers or something like that. It's about having an audience in your head. Like, like thinking, am I creating this for children, or am I creating this for teenagers? Am I creating this for this type of audience or this type of audience? And there's something about the Empress, and this is going back to the Six of Wands here. Know your audience. That's another thing that the Empress wants us to remember. It's like, know your audience and know who will nourish you back. She wants us to remember that we have the full understanding within us who is and who isn't going to nourish us back. And she does, like, that's where the Empress is coming in kind of very dry cut. She's saying, don't fool yourself and don't try to pretend that a certain audience or a certain group of people is going to nourish you when you know they're not going to. Stop trying to get them to nourish you and go to the audience and the group of people who will. Because there will always be someone who will want to nourish you, but you need to figure out who those people are. And so the Empress comes out as a reminder that nourishment doesn't just go one way. It's a process where we give back. We give back. If someone nourishes us, we must nourish them. Maybe not in the same way, definitely not in the same way. It's always different, but the nourishment is needed to, like, the nourishment cycle needs to come back to the person. It needs to be a cycle. It can't be a one-way stream. And so when you get nourished by a talent, when you were a child, if you were nourished by a drawing talent that brought you happiness and invigorated you as a child, as an adult, once you've cultivated, maybe you became really good at art, or you became really good at singing because this skill was nourishing you through those years. It's time to give back to that talent. It's time to give back to that skill. By honoring it, by saying thank you. And in a way, you're nourishing the past versions of yourself. But it's a back and forth momentum, and you cannot create something like a piece of work, or you cannot make something that is existent in the material world that is truly you, if you didn't at some point derive a certain level of pleasure and enjoyment creating it. And if you don't give thanks to your own talents and skills before you decide to worship that thing. And she's also talking about, just on a more broad sense, what I'm getting here is like, when we worship something that is, we might worship something that is an object or like a static thing that was created, rather than worshiping or admiring all the work and all the skill and all the effort that was put in by the energies around it. And the only way we should worship an object is if we are worshiping that object with the understanding that this is just a symbol for the talent. And that's what the Empress is trying to say. It's like when you're looking at an artwork and you're appreciating the artwork, there's no point in appreciating the artwork if you're going to put it on a pedestal. I'm almost seeing like the equivalent of like Mona Lisa and how people go to see the Mona Lisa, but it's like people look at Mona Lisa from the point of view, I'm going to go to see it. I'm just going to, it's a very famous artwork. I'm going to go to see it. If you're not going to see it to really appreciate the intricacies of the effort and the talent and the accumulation and the cultivation of talent that it took to create that, and if you're really not aware of it, there's not really a point of you looking in that direction even. And I feel like, because the Empress can talk about art, but it's like, how do you appreciate art? Do you appreciate it through the lens of like, oh, that's a cool piece of art, and I'm looking at the object, I'm looking at what's in front of me? Or are you looking behind the scenes? And like, that's where the Empress comes in with that yin feminine energy, subconscious energy. Am I appreciating something that is very obviously in front of me, or am I worshiping and appreciating the invisible, something that the Empress teaches us how to worship the invisible, something that otherwise we would not see. How do you worship something that isn't there in flesh? How do you appreciate something and honor something that isn't there in flesh? Like the talent that it took to create something, like the effort that it took to create something, the rest and rejuvenation that it took to create something. But that's, you know, there's so many facets. I feel like I could be here for hours doing this specific reading, but I'm kind of running out of breath now. And I feel like that's the main point that the Empress wanted to get across here today. So we're going to leave this reading here. I hope you enjoyed this reading. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like this reading, do like, subscribe, and comment. You can also tip me. The thanks button is at the bottom if you wanted to tip me under this video. It's like a love heart button. You can also tip me on my PayPal. The PayPal link is below. And if you would like to get a reading with me, you can get it on Etsy. The link is also down below. And if you'd like to join my Patreon to get more pick-a-card readings by me, you can check that out as well. But I'm going to leave this reading here. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye!